Connor Wagner has been the Park Service Specialist and Volunteer Manager at Blue Springs State Park since September 2021. He has his BS in Environmental Science and Land Management from the University of West Florida and his MS in Environmental Science and Policy from the University of South Florida. Before working for Blue Spring, he worked for the Longleaf Alliance in Northwest Florida, doing prescribed fire and land management work on sensitive habitats. Connor enjoys birding and giving educational talks to curious park visitors. Thank you so much, Connor, for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It's always nice to be able to talk outside of the park, about the park, as often as I can. So yeah, you guys can feel free. I might ask some questions that you guys can just, make, answer or make comments on in the chat room. I'll look at that as well for a few things as well. And like they said, if you have any questions about anything, we can get to them, at the end as well. We are talking about 3 species today. So, it'll be just kind of a short introduction into all 3 of them. So if you have any more specific questions, we can definitely kind of get into the weeds a little bit towards the end. So how many people have been to Blue Springs State Park? If you like, you can just type in the chat if you've been before, if you've never been before. I'm always under the mindset that most people that live within an hour and a half of the park have probably been here at least once in their life, just because it's so well known for several reasons. But other than that, so we are located in Orange City, Florida. I do say that because there are several other Blue Spring parks in the Florida Park Service. There's Madison Blue Spring, there's Lafayette Blue Spring, there's Gilchrist Blue Spring, and then we're just Blue Spring. I say, and we get lots of time to get people who drive to our park and have a camping reservation for a different Blue Spring. Like they're like, oh, I had camping at Gilchrist and they drove to Blue, so they got to turn around and head to the correct park. So we are located in Orange City. What a lot of people don't know is that we're almost 3,000 acres. We're about 2,643 acres big, and we have a lot of natural communities and a lot of imperiled species within that relatively small space. We have about 26 natural communities, and we have about 27 kind of listed imperiled species in the park as well, according to our 2022 unit management plan. And the 3 that we're going to talk about today are the 3 that I consider, none of them are more important than the others, but I consider these are some of our indicator or umbrella species, which essentially means that they are easy to identify, easy to find, and generally their health and well-being can reflect on the health and well-being of other species that might be a lot harder to survey, record, and study. So we'll be kind of getting into those 3 species here. So if most people that have heard of Blue Springs State Park before know it for 2 main reasons. One, in the summertime for our recreational activities, which include swimming, paddling, picnicking, camping, hiking. We do have a first magnitude spring, which releases about 105 million gallons of water a day. Clear water, lots of fish biodiversity, and all this cool stuff you can do there. In the winter time, we are the largest Florida manatee wildlife refuge, at least as far as we know now in the world. On January 17th of 2023, we had a historical record of 729 manatees located in the spring on a single morning. And we know that we have over 800 in the area during that time. That was just how many were in the spring when we opened up that morning. So one of our challenges as a park is how do we balance the recreation and the environmental protection? And like at a park like ours, a lot of people don't realize our park is almost 3,000 acres. Most people have only ever walked along the boardwalk and seen the spring, and they could have been coming to the park for decades. So there's a lot of other locations in the park that people can become aware of and stuff. So we were just talking about manatees, so we're going to get going with manatees right away. So my first question for you guys is, which animal do you guys think is the closest relative to the manatee? So if you guys want to type in the chat which one you think, if you think it's the elephant, the walrus, whales, or hippopotamus. So if you think you know which one it is, yeah, let's get a few responses in the chat box before I give it away. let's see, we got one elephant, we got a walrus calling there, we got whale, we got hippo. That's perfect. We got at least one answer for all four. So that's good. That's good. It means that we'll have at least 3 people are going to learn something. Are going to learn something new today. Yeah. So the answer is actually it's the elephant. The elephant is the closest living relative to the manatee. I try to trick my audience with that one, just because it's the only one in this picture that's not near water. I've got, the other 3 all have water in the picture and the elephant doesn't. So I always try to trick people with that one. So don't feel bad. But yeah, the answer is the elephant. And there is a few reasons for that. One of the reasons is their kind of iconic gray, wrinkly skin. They have that same kind of skin texture as elephants do. Small white hairs over their body because they are mammals. Wrinkly, light grayish color. They also have very similar eyes. They have about the same level of visibility. Their eyes are very small given the general size of their heads, which is just another interesting fact. Another big thing is, if you can see in the bottom right photo, they actually have these fingernails on their flippers. And those fingernails are reminiscent of an age-long path where these animals separated that are similar to the large toe pads on an elephant's foot. So at some point, those were feet used to walk on land, and several tens of 20 to 30 million years ago, they reverted back to flippers, and manatees went back into the water. So a few additional facts about them, and prefacing this by saying that thanks to the work that we do here at Blue Spring, we actually have manatees that far exceed these averages in weight, size, age, reproduction, and all that stuff. So on average, a manatee weighs between 800 and 1,200 pounds, but we have manatees at our park that we are averaging anywhere from like 1,500 to 2,500 pounds. We also have, manatees on average around 10 feet. We have lots of manatees recorded in the park that are anywhere from 11 to 13 feet long. And kind of the most promising is that on average, manatees only live about 7 to 13 years, and that's usually because something happens to them, whether it's like a lack of food or a boat strike or pollution of water, entanglements, things like that. However, the manatees kind of living at our park tend to average around like 20 to 40 years because manatees in captivity can live over 50 to 60 years. And we have some that we've been tracking by their scar patterns and through satellite tracking that have been alive almost since we became a park in 1972, which is about a little over 50 years ago. So very promising information there. So the reason why manatees come to Blue Spring State Park is for our warm water in the wintertime. So all the springs in Florida are always 72 degrees Fahrenheit. So in wintertime, when the river is very, very cold and the oceans get cold, our spring is always 72 degrees. So the manatees know that they can come to these springs for that warm water during that time. Now, a lot of people always think that manatees have lots of blubber because they look very reminiscent of walruses and seals and stuff. But manatees actually have very little to no blubber. So they get cold almost as easy as we do, and they can get hypothermia almost as easily as a human being can. So if you were sitting in the ocean or in a river at like 40, 50 degrees on a really, really cold winter day, you could start having organs shut down, skin lesions, things like that. Manatees can have the same thing happen to them. So they have to find that warmer spring water for survival. So that usually happens between November and March. So during that time of the year, we close all water recreation, no kayaking, no swimming, no snorkeling, and the spring is only there for the manatees. So they can come in and stay warm and relax, for that time. Now, in the summer month, most of them migrate out into the St. John's or the Atlantic Ocean. However, especially like in the news and things like that recently, if you've been looking at local news and stuff, we have had some interesting things happening with manatees at our park, even though it's, we're off of the normal manatee season. One of the fan favorite adoptees from Save the Manatee Club, Annie, recently gave birth to a new calf. I think it was March 18th or 19th. And her baby have been coming into the spring regularly. So if you ever come to the park, you might have a good chance of seeing Annie and her calf come into the park. Also, I think it was last Friday, if you've been looking at the news recently, we had a very unexpected mating herd of about 40 manatees come into the park into the refuge area. It was about 30 something manatees chasing one female. Her name is Matahari. She's another adoptee manatee. So if you don't know, the mating herd is usually like a whole bunch of males chasing a female, you know, and then the herds kind of, it comes together. And then, you know, after that, you know, they all kind of go their separate ways. So that was really, really exciting to capture on the cameras and stuff. Because usually we don't see more than 1 or 2 in a day. We had 40 come in just randomly one morning. So pretty exciting. What we do as a park from our manatee management strategies is we support rescues and releases, which you can see kind of in the pictures here on the PowerPoint slide. Basically, we're kind of the first eyes on the water. If we see a manatee that's been hit by a boat, or it's not behaving properly, or if it's entangled in something, we'll call Save the Manatee Club, Volusia County Marine Mammal Stranding, Florida Fish and Wildlife, all of our kind of like partner organizations, and we'll kind of get together, get that manatee out of the water, get it rescued, rehabilitated, and then get it released back into, you know, back into the park or back into the St. John's, which we do a lot of at our park. We are one of the most popular release sites in the state of Florida, especially in the wintertime, because especially for orphan calves, because for orphan calves, they never were able to learn from their mothers how to navigate the waterways. So if you just released an orphan calf out in the middle of the ocean, it wouldn't know where to go to find food, and it wouldn't know where to go to find warm water when it got cold in the wintertime. So by releasing them at Blue Spring, they learn about the warm water there so that when they leave, and they know how to come back and find it themselves. Also, they can hang out with other manatees. Sometimes an orphan will find a manatee that they really like and become friends with, and they might leave together, and that manatee might show the orphan the ropes and stuff. We actually had the largest manatee release in history at our park. I believe it was March 12th. We had 11 manatees released on a single day, which is the most manatees that have ever been released on a single day. So we had partner organizations from all around the country come down to drop off manatees at our park. So it was very exciting. Other things we do is, you know, we protect manatees from harassment. We don't allow people to touch the manatees, grab onto them, do anything like that. You know, you might see advertisements from locations like on the Crystal River on the Gulf side where, you know, people touch them and stuff like that. We don't allow any of that at Blue Spring. You have to be a minimum of 20 feet away from them at all times, even if they swim into the swimming area. And that is so the manatees don't get too connected to people and they don't end up getting themselves hurt. We want our manatees to live long and happy lives. And in the long term, interacting with people is a negative thing, just as, you know, as it is with all other animals, bears, alligators, squirrels, scrub jays, things like that. So I will jump over to Gopher tortoises now. So a lot of people don't even know we have these animals because, again, like I told you, most people just think of the water and the spring and the boardwalk when they think of our park. But we do have gopher tortoises, and we have a very stable, healthy population of them at Blue Spring. If you don't know, they're the only native tortoise east of the Mississippi River. So if you see a tortoise walking around in the state of Florida that doesn't look like a gopher tortoise, it doesn't belong there. It was probably a released pet or something like that. So that's always something to keep in mind. They average about 9-11 inches in length, and they can live about 40 to 60 years in the wild. Their most iconic features about them are their front legs and their back legs. Their back legs are very kind of stumpy and elephant-like. They almost look like a mini elephant foot, whereas their front legs are these large, flattened, shovel-like forelimbs, large kind of talons that they can use to move dirt very efficiently. And they are ecosystem engineers, which this kind of picture kind of demonstrates that very well. That I actually got an old coloring book page from my old job that we have kids kind of color in and things like that. So the reason why I could call them ecosystem engineers, which if you don't know what that term means, it just pretty much means that it's an animal that can manipulate their habitat in such a way that it kind of creates new habitat or new microhabitats for other animals. Or it helps build habitat, like they are actively involved, whether directly or indirectly, in creating new habitat in their area. So, and the reason for that is the gopher tortoise's iconic burrow. They spend about 80% of their lives in these burrows, and these burrows can be up to 40 feet long and 10 feet deep, depending on, you know, how high above the water level you are or what the topography of the area that you're living in. But just know that if you have seen a gopher tortoise burrow, which I'm sure many of you guys, if you live in Florida, have seen one before, that the actual tortoise itself could be almost 10 feet deep in the ground and almost 40 feet back farther from where you actually see the burrow. So they're not just right there. It's way, way back there. And really the cool thing about these burrows is that they serve as a refuge for, it's been reported, over 350 different species of animals occupying or living in these burrows. And a lot of those are some of the imperiled species that we have in the park, such as gopher frog, Florida pine snake, eastern indigo snakes, Florida mouse, and countless other species. So that's kind of why I said that they're an umbrella species that we can make pretty logical assumptions that if our gopher tortoise population is doing well, that means our habitat is doing well, which means that a lot of these other animals are probably doing well too. Animals that are much harder to find and come across and study, especially when we're trying to balance our everyday recreation with this research and management as well. So what we do for gopher tortoises in the park is we do prescribed fire, which again, a lot of people don't really know that prescribed fires even happen in Blue because everyone just thinks of the water. But we have lots of habitats that depend on prescribed fire, which include a lot of the habitats that gopher tortoises occupy: xeric flatwoods, pine flatwoods, scrub. Do snakes predate tortoise eggs? They do sometimes. Actually, I would say what predates them more are like raccoons and things like that. Raccoons are very good at sniffing out tortoise eggs and kind of digging them out, and they could potentially eat the eggs. They do it a lot with marine turtles like yellow belly sliders and Florida soft shells as well. But yeah, I mean, they are all potential predators for tortoise eggs too. Tortoises don't lay their eggs in their burrow like a lot of people think. They actually lay their eggs just on the outside of their burrow in some deep down in some soft sand. So they wouldn't just like go into the burrow and find the eggs in there. So yeah. So what we do, prescribed fire is the biggest thing we do. We do a lot of hardwood removal and mechanical treatment, which we'll kind of talk about when we get into scrub jays a bit more, because a lot of their management practices are the same in our park because they occupy the same habitat. We do protect from visitor impacts. The biggest visitor impact that we have in our park is, conflicts with cars and vehicles. So we have gopher tortoises, especially during this time of year, crossing our road very frequently. So having signs like these and managing speed limits and people driving in the park is very important to make sure we don't have gopher tortoises getting hit, inside the park and things like that. That's kind of the biggest interactions we get in our park with gopher tortoises and people. And we also do outreach and education to teach people about these. This is an old gopher tortoise burrow that I made out of like PVC pipe and some tarp and things like that for kids to crawl through to kind of see what a gopher tortoise burrow is like. And we had some like stuffed animals and some like rubber snakes and things like that, and like a gopher tortoise shell and stuff to represent like some of the critters that they might see if you were a gopher tortoise going inside those burrows as well. So this is a bird chat, so I wanted to make sure that we spent extra time on the Florida scrub jay, which is one of my favorite animals, and I wouldn't be surprised at least one other person's favorite animal in this chat as well. But they really are super incredible birds. I always really like to brag that they are the only bird species endemic to the state of Florida, meaning that you will not find this bird anywhere else in the world but Florida. So if you're especially if you are an e-birder or someone birding from outside of the state of Florida and you're visiting here to do some birding, this is definitely a bird that somebody is going to want to put on their list, because otherwise they don't have any other chance to see it anywhere else they go. And Blue Spring is one of 10 state parks in the state of Florida that have Florida scrub jays. And it doesn't include like state forests and forestry and FWC lands and things like that. But from the 176 state parks that we have in the state of Florida, only 10 of them have Florida scrub jays on their property, and we are one of them. And part of that reason is because they depend on very unique Florida scrub habitat, which we do have in our upland areas just a few hundred feet past the water. Like just beyond that tree line, if you've ever been on the boardwalk, to your left, you got the water on one side, you got some tall trees on the other side. If you just go 100 feet past those trees, you're immediately going to break into some scrub habitat that's just at that nice elevation with that sandy soil that keeps it nice and dry There's all different types of scrub oaks and herbaceous plants growing there that those scrub jays like to live in. So, talking a little bit about their diets and things like that. So, in the fall and winter, their main diet is acorns. And in the spring and summer, which we are getting into now, because we are like deep into their nesting season now. So, we will be expecting, juveniles here soon. They rely on high protein meals such as insects, berries, seeds, small amphibians, reptiles, mice. They're pretty opportunistic. They'll pretty much go for anything if they see it moving. And they're going to want to feed that to their chicks because that high protein is really essential for their development. And so I'm sure if a lot of you guys, are familiar with Florida scrub jays, I'm sure you've either if you were really young. I mean, I know when I was really, really young, I've given a scrub jay a peanut. I don't do it anymore. But, you always do hear like a lot of people, try to feed Florida scrub jays and things like that. And you might go to properties where scrub jays get very close to you, and that's likely because people have been feeding them and interacting with them. But, we tell people, peanuts are not good for Florida scrub jays long term. One of the most obvious reasons is that it creates an unhealthy relationship between scrub jays and people. It brings scrub jays out into the open more outside of the scrub. That puts them at a greater risk of predators such as like hawks, feral cats, and potentially people. From a dietary standpoint, especially like during this time of year, like I told you, they want to feed themselves and their chicks these high protein meals. But peanuts are really, really high in fiber, and they don't have a lot of those proteins. And a peanut is also very filling to a scrub jay. So if you give them a peanut and they bring that peanut back to their chicks and they eat the peanut, they're going to fill up really fast, and they're not going to get enough calories, and they're not going to get enough protein that they really needed that day. So they might not develop as as efficiently as they would if they were fed the proper high protein foods. Whereas like in the fall and winter, when they're looking for acorns, they are looking for fattier things, high fiber things to fill them up, because insects and amphibians and reptiles are scarcer during those colder, drier seasons. Another pretty cool thing about scrub jays, which does make them what I consider another ecosystem engineer, is that they'll actually cache up to 8,000 acorns a year. They'll dig little holes and they'll bury their acorns in the ground. And a single scrub jay can do up to kind of 8,000 in a single year, given that they have enough open sandy patches. Now, they are in the corvid family. So, just like other corvids, like crows, jays, crows, ravens, things like that, they have incredible memory. They have very good spatial awareness, and they can they're very good at remembering where they leave those acorns. What makes them ecosystem engineers is that oftentimes, they won't go back and get every single acorn that they cached. Those acorns they essentially are helping plant and spread those acorns. So given the opportunity, to spread, they can kind of help scrub habitat expand in their own, indirect way. So another cool thing about Florida scrub jays, they are cooperative breeders, which only like less than 3% of birds worldwide have this behavior, which essentially means that they live in these family groups and the entire family works together to raise the next generation of chicks. So these family groups can be anywhere from 2 to 8 scrub jays at a time. They've got, these like kind of matriarchal, they got these patriarchals, and they have like a matriarch. And then they got the first generation juveniles, and then they have the newborn chicks as kind of the hierarchy of these scrub jays. The young adults, so what you consider like the teenagers, young adults, they'll help raise their parents' chicks that just hatched by babysitting, feeding them, protecting the nestlings if something goes wrong. A lot of times they're the ones that kind of get the sentinel or lookout job, which pretty much means that they go up on the tallest tree branch and look out at the horizon on the landscape to look out for any potential predators or threats, while the parents and the other jays are on the ground feeding and looking for food. So here's another thing to type in the chat. What other animals can you think of that have similar behaviors, like sentinels, lookouts, like similar behaviors to the Florida scrub jay? It doesn't have to be in Florida. It can be, anywhere in the world. Like, what animals can you think of that kind of do the same thing. They've got like family groups, they'll have one or two of them that'll go up to a high place and keep an eye on things while the others are doing their, doing their business and things like that. Very good. Yeah, meerkats. Meerkats is a great one. RCWs, yeah, they are also colonial as well. Prairie dogs, very good. True, yeah, gorillas. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, they do have family units too, and they're going to have sentinel. They're going to have, people obviously going to have at least one of them looking out for threats and things like that too. When it comes to like meerkats and prairie dogs, any animal that lives kind of low to the ground, and they're going to want to have somebody on the highest area to kind of look around to see if they see a snake coming from far away, see if they see a hawk flying, because since all the trees are very low, they can really see all around them. They're not just going to have a hawk, hiding in a 40, 50-foot tree, stalking them, because the scrub habitat is so low that there's really nowhere for those hawks to perch at and things like that. Very good. Thank you guys for entertaining me with that. So getting into our Florida scrub jay management, we do a whole lot of things for our Florida scrub jays, especially because scrub is such a it is considered an endangered habitat because it's so heavily used for development and things like that. And the reason why it is particularly hard to manage for scrub jays, like when you think of birds, you think they can just you got a lot of know about habitat loss and defragmentation, but a lot of birds will fly to other locations if they get the chance. But Florida scrub jays will really rarely travel more than about like 2 to 5 miles from where they hatch from. And they're really not going to fly over things like highways. They're not going to fly in areas that have dense, thick, tall vegetation. So, as their scrub habitat just keeps decreasing, it's going to be very, very rare to find a scrub jay that's just going to leave that scrub and go to another one, because they're all so fragmented now in the state of Florida. It's going to be very hard to get one scrub jay to fly, somewhere and go to a new scrub habitat. So what's most likely going to happen is that population is going to get smaller and smaller, and if the scrub is gone, all those scrub jays are going to be gone too. So that's why it's very important to preserve and conserve the scrub habitat we do have left for them. Also, they prefer their scrub habitat to be 6 to 10 feet tall with open sandy ground patches. They need those sandy patches so they can bury their acorns in the ground to cache them and things like that. So some of their threats, as I said, habitat loss, fragmentation, fire suppression. By suppressing fire, you allow the habitat, the trees to get taller and it to get thicker, and they lose those sandy patches that they rely on. Pesticides and herbicides, like if you've got communities building up along scrub habitat and they're using all these things, they're going to kill all of the insects and things like that these scrub jays, depend on in their scrub habitat. And then predators. The biggest predator to Florida scrub jays is being, outdoor cats and feral cats is really the most efficient predator for them now. Natural predators include raccoons, owls, hawks, snakes, but these introduced feral cats and things like that are really their biggest threat, especially because scrub jays live so low to the ground, 6 to 10 feet off the ground, that cats have a really easy chance getting to their nest and getting to the birds themselves. So looking at this really quick, the dark green section, kind of on the dark green section over here on the right side, that is our scrub habitat. We have about 330-ish acres of scrub habitat. We have about 110 acres of scrubby flatwoods, which is sometimes occupied by the scrub jays. That's kind of like the really light brown just to the left of that dark green. And then we also have xeric hammock, which you have about 165 acres of. That is up north, just north of the really dark green. You see a really, really light green. That's our xeric hammock habitat. That's habitat that, based on historical records, used to be scrub, but because it's been fire suppressed for so long, the oak trees have fully grown in. They've created a canopy and they've shaded out the ground underneath it. And now it's become like a dry hammock instead of a scrub. So the scrub jays really don't occupy it, and they very rarely even hang out along that edge as well. So what we do in the park, since we've opened, we have harvested 120 acres with timber harvest. And we've spent over $65,000 on habitat mowing. We've done $55,000 in grant funding and partnerships with local land managers such as Volusia County. And we do our prescribed fire. Ultimately, the goal is to get rid of those tall trees, burn it down, mow it down, harvest the trees down, open up those sandy patches, bring the sunlight back to the ground, bring back those herbaceous plants, try and turn that habitat back into scrub habitat that our scrub jays will hopefully move back into. That is sort of our goal. So another thing that we do in our park is our surveying and banding efforts. We've been banding birds at our park for the last 25 years. If you've banded at any other state parks and stuff, you know, we all have unique kind of property colors. I believe the state parks, at least our state park, red over silver bands on the right leg is the unique property color for Blue Spring. And I believe it is for some of the other state parks as well. However, the bands on their left leg are going to be unique to each individual banded Florida scrub jay, which we use to, you know, track if their territories change, if that scrub jay ends up leaving and making its own territory or its own family group. We'll keep, you know, we'll track them, you know, that way as well. We had our Jay Watch in 2022. Our biologist was out there with us as well. We identified 14 different family groups. We identified 35 adults and at least 3 juveniles during that Jay Watch. And it was kind of deemed that we have a stable population given the amount of scrub habitat that we currently have. And that doesn't mean that there weren't more scrub jays or that there weren't more juveniles. That's just what we saw during our 3 days of surveying the park. So kind of wrapping things up here, different ways you can help. I mean, in your own lives, like calls to action, you know, do not hand feed wildlife, protect birds from cats, you know, don't bring birds to locations where you know you also have lots of, you know, feral cats, you know, such as in your yards and things like that. You know, you don't want to put out a bird feeder when you know you've got feral cats in your yard. You're just, you know, bringing birds, you know, putting birds up on a dinner plate. Control chemical use if you live near scrub. Planting native scrub vegetation brings those insects and those vertebrates that those scrub jays are going to eat if you live near scrub. Support the creation of scrub jay preserves, preserving and conserving scrub habitat. Do not support uncontrolled development, trying to reduce that habitat fragmentation. And then voting to make Florida our official state bird. I know there's a lot of people out there like Seminole Audubon Society and the Seminole High School has been doing a lot of work to try and, you know, make some of the Florida scrub jay the state bird, because currently it's the northern mockingbird. At our park specifically, I am always looking for volunteers to help with a variety of tasks. I am the volunteer coordinator at our park too. So if you are interested in volunteering at Blue, you will go straight to me. And I have a lot of kind of fun things for scrub jays that I kind of have in the works right now that don't involve, you know, being out there with like a machete cutting trees down and stuff, unless that's what you want to do. We do have our annual Jay Watch. I'm sure lots of you are already signed up. We're planning to sign up for Jay Watches in other areas, but we have our annual Jay Watch surveys going on June 20th, June 21st, and June 22nd of this year. So just a little over a month away. It's 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It usually takes, you know, almost a full day, like, you know, 5 to 7 hours of doing it if you've ever done it before. I'm always looking for, you know, experienced volunteers, especially volunteers that have birding experience too. You know, so I'm sure a lot of you, if you've done it before, you know, sometimes in the right lighting and stuff, it can be hard to get those band colors and stuff, and getting those bands is really, really important for our surveys. So if that's something you're interested in, you can definitely reach out to me. We're trying to start an Adopt a Jay program, kind of similar to Save the Manatee Club's Adopt a Manatee program, where you could pay like an annual fee. You'll get like a certificate with a specific scrub jay, which will be identified based on its band colors. You'll get a certificate, little information about them. Additional benefits, maybe like free park passes to the park, photos of your, regular photos of your bird that are taken. Potentially could include like, a free membership to the Friends of Blue Spring State Park. And I actually need volunteer photographers too. I actually need more people to help me take photos of these birds, like really nice quality photos of these birds, especially if they've got their bands in the photos. 'Cause I see all these other locations and they've got so many pictures of scrub jays that people are just going out and taking pictures of all the time. They've almost like created life stories for these birds because of, all the photos that have been taken over the years for them. And I'd really like to bring awareness to the Florida scrub jays at our park too. So I actually just need photographer volunteers that want to just come out, for however long, go out to some areas in our park, take pictures of them that, with your permission, we could use for like adopt a Jay programs to include with their certificates, or we can include them in like regular surveys and different things like that. Also, we do several jaywalks a month, either led by a ranger or by volunteers who will do a short guided hike about less than a quarter mile through like an area of our park where we've got at least 2 territories pretty close to each other. We always see at least one scrub jay when we go on that walk, trying to teach the outside community a little bit more about Florida scrub jays. If you do have kind of a interest in education or interpretation, I am always looking for more volunteers that want to lead additional jaywalks, because it's something that I would love to do. The more jaywalks we can do, the better. I would love to, just keep, rocking jaywalks as often as we can. So providing that education is very, very important. Especially for me being an education coordinator as well. And then, so there are other opportunities too. If you're more interested in manatees, you can become like a manatee observer where you help us, prevent human harassment of manatees in the spring. We have our manatee rovers who do education and interpretation during the winter time when all the manatees come in large numbers. We want to do like more quarterly surveys for our scrub jays. So, having more volunteers to help with quarterly surveys, not just for the annual one we do in June or July, would also be really, really helpful too. And there's a slew of other things that you could do. These are just the things that are specific to some of the animals that we talked about today. Other than that, this is my contact information up on the screen right now. If you are interested in volunteering, or if you have questions about programs or the animals or any things like that, if you are interested in helping with our Jay Watch coming up in June, I'll be the person to reach out to start getting signed up, RSVP and signed up to help us with that as well. Other than that, I know like we only really scratched the surface of these 3 animals, but if you guys have any questions about any of these animals, or if you have questions about the park itself, I'd be glad to answer some of those.
Thank you, Connor. Super. Questions?
Oh yeah, no problem. I mean, I could do any one presentation on any one of these animals, so trying to, get into, doing all 3 in one was, I realized when I offered, I was like, hey, maybe I should have just picked one animal and gone with that one, but there's so much more I always want to talk about with each one. So.
Connor, so the lower parking lot toward the river, and then at the top of it, you could take that trail back, and then it's a long trail out in the scrubby flatwoods, I guess. Are there jays out that way?
There are jays out that way. You go through the hammock when you go. It's called the Pine Island Trail. You go through the hammock, you break out into them scrubby flatwoods, and after a little bit more walking, you get out to the scrub out there. You'll know you're there when you see the trails turn into soft sand and you no longer have any shade. So you'll know you'll be in the scrub there. We have several family groups out there. I usually always see them a few times there. If you follow the trail to the right, that's where the actual trail goes. If you actually go left instead down that service road, there are several families that hang out right along the edge there that I often see. We have like a sewer treatment plant back there. So we have like a fence, and a lot of the scrub jays will just kind of hang out on that fence line too. So it's kind of a nice place to see them as well. Where we do our jay walks, our little interpretive things, is actually if you pay at the ranger station and drive down like 400, 500 feet down the road, there's a dirt road on your right. You take a right down there. It's actually our admin building where like our park manager and assistant park manager's office is. It doesn't look like a place where you can park, but you can just park anywhere where there's a spot where you won't get in someone's way. And there's all a bunch of scrub back there, and there's a small little triangular loop less than a quarter mile, where we see scrub jays all the time on that little loop right there. So if you ever want to just come into the park real quick and not have to walk very far and see them, that's what I always tell people. A lot of times you can just pull up, and the scrub jays are they're like hopping around the roof of our admin building, so you can just kind of see them, just see them right there without having to start making your way all the way down the trail, especially on a hot day. So that's why we can still do the tours in like June and July, because I'm not going to have everyone walk like a mile down Pine Island, a mile back in the middle of summer or anything. So
How about in the camping area?
the camping area, I mean, in the camping area itself, we don't really have any reports of scrub jays coming through. It's really because the camping area is very fire suppressed in that immediate area. Well, it's fire suppressed, well, one, because there's campers there all the time, so it's not easy to burn. The campers demand the shade. So, they always get even if we got to cut trees down, we start getting complaints that there's no more shade at their sites. So, it's been kind of left to grow over so that they have shady sites. And then also, a lot of people, it's not a good thing. We try to teach people not to do it. A lot of people will release cats in the campground from their RVs and stuff. So, we do have a lot of cats that hang out around the campground. So the scrub jays do tend to just stay away from those areas as well. But if you leave the campground and go, to the scrub just immediately adjacent to it, you will find, jays out there. But I haven't had any reports of jays hopping around anyone's sites or anything. So. I do have a question here. Do you have more space available for new family groups? We're as far as the amount of scrub we have, I mean, we're pretty much kind of at, what I would call a carrying capacity. So as far as having too many more jays, they could break off and make new family groups. As I said, scrub jays, their groups can be anywhere from just 2 to 8. So, right now we might say we have 2 groups that are 8. 2 of those jays, a male and a female, could leave, mate, have chicks, and then they create their own family group within that same space. They'll just have to, dish out the territories and stuff. So there is a possible that family groups could get smaller and break up and make more family groups. But that is part of our motivation to try and bring some of the scrub habitat back. It's a lot of expensive work. I mean, prescribed fire is the cheapest, easiest, most efficient way of doing it. But in some areas that are so heavily fire suppressed, there's no choice but to do either intensive timber harvesting or habitat mowing, just to get the habitat to a place where we can actually burn it and then bring the scrub back, which, conserving the habitat we have is way easier than bringing habitat back. We're talking, your decades of work to, bring back, what is a, 50, 60 years of fire suppression and turn it from one habitat back to a healthy scrub that the scrub jays will use. That is a good question. Since I've been here, we haven't done it, but yeah, there is a lot of scrub jay relocation, though they have to do that for, like I said, for genetic diversity as well. They will, that is part of our things as well. Again, I've been here for 2 years and it hasn't even been brought up, but when the time comes, bird relocation is in our management plan, where we will relocate birds to the other habitats, because scrub is so fragmented that these birds aren't going to get there themselves. They have been trying to study the behaviors, if you pull a jay out of a family group, how effective is that bird gonna be able to just quickly and easily just make its own new family group, or get into another family group without causing issues? So there has been a bit of back and forth kind of studying that behavior to see if these scrub jays, if a single scrub jay can be relocated, or if you need to take take an entire family group and relocate them, or maybe if you find that juvenile, that young adult that is ready to leave and make its own territory, you could maybe if you can capture that one and relocate one that's already looking for a new territory. But as far as taking a matriarch or a patriarch out of a family group, could cause problems if you we're just willy-nilly just pick a scrub jay and just move it to a new place. So estimate of how many jays are in the park, it's probably somewhere between that. Like I said, we had about 35. It's our best estimate would be between 35 and 50. we've had other counts in the past where you know, we had like 40 something, and you know we get the juveniles. So yeah, I mean, we really we just go off of our J watch. Currently we just go off our J watches, which gives us our, you know, our information. Like I said, I would love to do more surveys. A lot of them would be citizen science volunteer led, because our, you know, our biologist is the district biologist, so he runs all of the Central Florida state parks, not just our park. So he's trying to do, you know, a lot of work, so he can't be out there and do quarterly surveys at Blue. So between like myself, some of our other rangers that are more bird natural resources oriented, and trying to get some more volunteers to try and schedule quarterly ones, we're trying to hope to get a better understanding of our birds, you know, kind of you know, year round in the park. So that is something that we're trying to get off the ground ourselves. The closest one to us here, well, there's probably, I mean, there are some that have been seen in there are some in Rock Springs Run. Lyonia is very close. You know, Wekiwa in certain areas, you know, Wekiwa, Rock Springs Run, Lower Wekiwa River Preserve, those are huge swaths of land that do have, you know, some little bits of scrub in them. You also have the Seminole State Forest as well, which also has scrub jays. So we do have a lot of, you know, there are, compared to most places in the state of Florida, we do actually still kind of have maintained quite a nice contiguous habitat in this area with between our parks and the Ocala National Forest and, you know, FWC land and the state forest. But a lot of that scrub is still too far in between for these scrub jays to travel from one to another. Whenever there is a report of a scrub jay that's gone more than like 10 miles or something, it makes like big news in the scrub jay community. If you've ever followed like Audubon Jay Watches on Facebook or any other you know, scrub jay groups that are tracking bands and things like that.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the photographers, I will say the photographers are a big thing. I really want some more volunteer photographers. I would love to get more really nice photos of our jays, both for like social media, outreach, education, surveying, you know, getting those bands and things like that. You know, right now, like we're trying to start this Adopt a Jay program. But right now, I'm like, I don't have any good pictures of a jay that I would like want to give to a person that has that has an identifiable band on their legs to be like, this is the jay you adopted. They can be, you know, they're located on the south side of the property. So when they come in, they'd be like, I'm looking for the jay that's got red, silver right leg, you know, green over orange on the left leg. And I'm like, oh yeah, your best chance is down Pine Island. You know, that's kind of the, you know, the goal we're trying to get to with this program. So, but the first thing is getting pictures. So.
Okay, but we'll give it a try. We have some good photographers in our group.
Yeah.
All right, well, if we're winding down on questions, we'll just say thank you so much, Connor.
Yes,
thank
thank
you guys
you.
for having me.
That was
Yeah.
great. Thank you very much. That was so detailed.
Oh yeah, no problem. I was worried it wasn't going to be detailed enough for you guys. So.
Great to know and it's such a beautiful park.
Mhm. Mhm.
All right, everybody, have a good evening, good rest of the evening.
Yep.
Good
Yeah.
night, everyone.
Good night. Hope to see you next week in person.
At Lou Gardens. Thanks again, Connor.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Bye.
Everyone have a good rest of your night.